Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 322. Chapter 322. The Fifth Company was bivouacking at the very edge of the forest. A huge campfire was blazing brightly in the midst of the snow, lighting up the branches of trees heavy with hoarfrost. About midnight, they heard the sound of steps in the snow of the forest and the crackling of dry branches. "A bear, lads," said one of them. They all raised their heads to listen, and out of the forest into the bright firelight stepped two strangely clad human figures clinging to one another. These were two Frenchmen who had been hiding in the forest. They came up to the fire, hoarsely uttering something in a language our soldiers did not understand. One was taller than the other. He wore an officer's hat and seemed quite exhausted. On approaching the fire, he had been going to sit down, but fell. The other, a short, sturdy soldier with a shawl tied round his head, was stronger. He raised his companion and said something, pointing to his mouth. The soldiers surrounded the Frenchman, spread a great coat on the ground for the sick man, and brought some buckwheat porridge and vodka for both of them. The exhausted French officer was Rambal, and the man with his head wrapped in a shawl was Morel, his orderly. When Morel had drunk some vodka and finished his bowl of porridge, he suddenly became unnaturally merry and chattered incessantly to the soldiers, who could not understand him. Rambal refused food, and resting his head on his elbow lay silent beside the campfire, looking at the Russian soldiers with red and vacant eyes. Occasionally he emitted a long-drawn groan, and then again became silent. Morel, pointing to his shoulders, tried to impress on the soldiers the fact that Rambal was an officer and ought to be warmed. A Russian officer, who had come up to the fire, sent to ask his colonel whether he would not take a French officer into his hut to warm him, and when the messenger returned and said that the colonel wished the officer to be brought to him, Rambal was told to go. He rose and tried to walk, but staggered, and would have fallen had not a soldier standing by helped hold him up. "You won't do it again, huh?" said one of the soldiers, winking and turning mockingly to Rambal. "Oh, you fool! Why talk rubbish, lout that you are, a real peasant!" came rebukes from all sides, addressed to the jesting soldier. They surrounded Rambal, lifted him up on the crossed arms of two soldiers, and carried him to the hut. Rambal put his arms around their necks while they carried him, and began wailing plaintively, "Oh, you fine fellows, my kind, kind friends! These are men! Oh, my brave, kind friends!" And he leaned his head against the shoulder of one of the men like a child. Meanwhile, Morel was sitting in the best place by the fire, surrounded by the soldiers. Morel, a short, sturdy Frenchman with inflamed and streaming eyes, was wearing a woman's cloak and had a shawl tied woman's fashion round his head over his cap. He was evidently tipsy and was singing a French song in a hoarse, broken voice, with an arm thrown round the nearest soldier. The soldiers simply held their sides as they watched him. Now then, teach us how it goes. It'll soon pick up. How is it?" said the man, a singer and a wag, whom Morel was embracing. "Vive Henri Croix! Vive ces revelants!" sang Morel, winking. "C'est diable! Accroître!" "Vive Rica! Viva Suruka! Sebadulaka!" repeated the soldier, flourishing his arms and really catching the tune. "Bravo! Ha ha ha!" rose their rough, joyous laughter from all sides. Morel, wrinkling up his face, laughed too. Well, go on, go on. Que les troupes talent debout débattre et d'être un vergalant. Ah, go smoothly too. Well now, Zaletev, you sing. Que, Zaletev brought forth with an effort. Qui, he drawled, laboriously pursing his lips. Les troupes talent debout débat c'est d'être gras, he sang. Sounds like me. Fine, just like the Frenchie. Oh, ho, ho. Do you want some more to eat? Give him more porridge. It takes a long time to get filled up after starving. They gave him some more porridge, and Morel with a laugh set to work on his third bowl. All the young soldiers smiled gaily as they watched him. The older men, who thought it undignified to amuse themselves with such nonsense, continued to lie at the opposite side of the fire, but one would occasionally raise himself with an elbow and glance at Morel with a smile. They are men too, said one of them as he wrapped himself up in his coat. Even wormwood grows on its own root. Oh, Lord, how starry it is. Tremendous. That means a hard frost. They all grew silent. The stars, as if knowing that no one was looking at them, began to disport themselves in the dark sky, now flaring up, now vanishing, now trembling. They were busy whispering something gladsome and mysterious to one another. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 322 of War and Peace, complete with my trademark butchering of the French language. You're welcome, you're welcome. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 322. It is yourself you spare. Rambal returns. The last time we met with the good French officer, he had just strolled into Moscow with the conquestial confidence of Hernan Cortez, the liberal munificence of the Lily Endowment, and the sly Gallic charm of Jean-Paul Belmondo. Things aren't so good for him anymore, though. They've changed for the worse, dramatically so. Today, he finds himself divorced from the comfortable confines of fine urban living and confronted instead with the awful choice of either freezing to death in the cold Russian winter or entering the enemy's camp. The enemy, let us recall, are the Russians. These are the very people who he, as an agent of the French invasion, had recently burned to the ground and expelled from their homes. Rambel has much to fear. But baby, it's cold outside. One can easily imagine all the horrible, vengeful things that await him. But none of them materialize. He's treated just fine. He is brought to the fire and offered food. Then, when his orderly, Morel, communicates to the Russian soldiers that Rambel is an officer and therefore due better treatment, they usher him to the officer's hut. Morel remains behind for food, song, and dance. In a novel that has articulated the intrinsic evil of war with the brutal rage and visceral cruelty of Twain's aged stranger, this act of clemency and grace comes as a welcome respite from all the madness. Here we find the universal reason of cosmopolitanism and forgiveness, two practices routinely emphasized by A Year of War and Peace. Daily meditation. When you appear to spare another, you are really sparing yourself. Seneca on clemency. All right then, that concludes my reading and reflection of chapter 322 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the description. Also in the description, you're going to find links to my Amazon wish list for books and movies. If you decide to support me by purchasing one or a few of those, that'd be great, and we can set up a Zoom call to discuss that book or that movie. At any rate, any way you decide to support me or not is fine, and it's much appreciated. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 323 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.